Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today as we discuss the important topic of high reliability cybersecurity. This webinar is the second in a two-part series discussing the topic of IT complexity, human performance, and how they affect cybersecurity. Don't worry if you didn't join the first webinar. You'll definitely learn something new and insightful today. The recording of the first session is also available on our website. I am Nick Hanser, an engagement director at WP&C, where part of my focus is on organizational design and operational excellence. We've designed this webinar to share our perspectives on human performance and how better leveraging humans is the path to a more secure cyber posture. At the end of the hour, you'll leave here with a better idea of what is driving the increases in cyber attacks, a different way to understand the true root causes of cyber incidents, and how organizations can reduce their cybersecurity risk without having to purchase another software license. We plan 35 minutes for the presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A. Please submit your questions using the chat, and we will follow up with you directly to any unanswered questions. This session will be recorded, and we will send the recording and slides to registered participants within the next few days. So now let me introduce Ernie Spence, one of our partners at WP&C, who will lead us through today's webinar. Ernie began his career in the U.S. Navy, where he was a fighter pilot and test pilot for 22 years. He commanded and successfully turned around multiple F-18 squadrons, and since transitioning into consulting, Ernie has brought his experience as a leader in one of the most dynamic environments in the world to shape our firm's perspective on human and organizational performance. He's received numerous awards for implementing transformational organizational-wide change, and during the presentation, Ernie will be joined by Dean Hamilton, WP&C's Chief Technology Officer. Dean is an industry leader in technology innovation and will bring his technical expertise to complement the discussion. Ernie, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Nick, and welcome everybody to this webinar where we're talking about how to improve our cybersecurity, get better results, and focusing on how we do that with our people and treating them as real assets and not threats. So as we jump into this, a couple of things that I want to just really start off with. And one, this is going to resonate throughout the entire of our presentation here, but there is a definitive link between complexity in our information technology systems and cybersecurity risk. Here at WP&C, the firm has written two books on best-selling books on complexity. And what we have shown over the course of working here in the firm is that human errors are very, very closely correlated to the level of complexity that exists in an environment. So as complexity goes up, human errors go up. And we've also done recent research on specific technologies related to security. One in particular is ZTNA. And out of this study is what we found that ZTNA is undermining the intended cybersecurity effectiveness because of the amount of complexity that is introducing to organizations and their operations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here as the presentation goes on. And lastly, here at WP&C, we've spent many years developing very unique insights into how to improve human performance in a complex environment. And what we understand now and what we are helping clients with is realize that their team members are essential to their cybersecurity strategy. And that may be counterintuitive to how many technology and business leaders think about it today. So let me hand it over to our Chief Technology Officer, Dean Hamilton, to talk a little bit about that paradox.
Thanks, Ernie. Let me just try to get the slide to change here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so in the last webinar, and I encourage you all to go look at that. We discussed the need for us to have sort of a frank conversation about where we are in the world with our approach to cybersecurity. My perspective is that we have failed. The last 30 years of our approach to cybersecurity has been a failure. And what we're seeing is cybersecurity attacks, cyber attacks continue to rise at a geometric rate. The cost of that in damages to our world and our way of life is also continuing to rise at a tremendous rate. And we, as Ernie said, we believe complexity is at the heart of this problem, of why we're actually seeing this. And we're spending so much to defend ourselves against these attacks, I think it's really important for us to step back and say we can't continue operating this way. We have to do something very, very different. The World Economic Forum has noted that some 95% or greater of the cybersecurity breaches and incidents are caused by human error. And I think we all kind of intuitively know that, those of us who kind of work in the space, but we've tried to sort of solve this problem, in a way that is not fit for the environment itself. We're trying to solve it in a way that is fit for a complicated environment. But in the last webinar, we discussed the fact that complex environments are very different than complicated environments and therefore require different solutions. And we noted that zero trust network access, as Ernie mentioned, for all the benefits that it can provide, also is increasing complexity substantially, and that is going to have a paradoxical kind of impact on the outcomes that we're trying to create. And so, in the world that as we've known it in the past 30 years, we've tried to take this approach where we said, hey, look, we're going to just try to create an impenetrable barrier to getting into our organization's resources. We're going to base that on some assumptions about the fact that we can actually understand the risks that we face and mitigate them. And then also we assume that because of this complexity issue, the fewer humans we have in the loop, the better. And that's created this, what we call this resistance-oriented approach, where we try to get, increase automation, minimize people, wrap people in a lot of strict policies and procedures and audits and so on, and then try focusing on people's failures and correcting those failures. But complex environments really require different tools. And what we are putting forward here, and what you hear Ernie talk about, is that really we need to recognize that people are not the problem, they're an essential part of the solution. And so the right tools for complex environments require us to realize that we will have some degree of unpredictability in the environment, that humans are going to be a critical part of that solution, and therefore we have to use a different set of approaches, ones that recognize that automation is useful, but it's not going to be the solution, that we have to defer to people's expertise and insight and judgment. And then we have to make our processes, design our processes and culture in a way that support the performance of people. And so this high reliability approach that Ernie is going to tell you about here as we go through this webinar is a proven approach to quickly turn your organization into this highly effective cybersecurity organization using what we call this resilience-oriented strategy that focuses on your people. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ernie.
Great. Thank you very much, Dean. So you've mentioned the problem, but I want to make sure we really understand how vast it is. Globally, cyber attacks are consuming about 8% of global GDP and the value they're extracting from the economies and the businesses they're going after. Here in the U.S., just recently, so far this year, we've seen a number of very substantive cyber attacks. Probably the most significant thus far this year was the one on Change Healthcare, which affected about 94% of all U.S. hospitals. It's driven nearly $1 billion worth of impact, and some 3.5–4 months later, it still is not fully resolved. Other interesting ones that attacked at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise that infiltrated through their Office 365 email system, and then ultimately spent a significant amount of time inside their SharePoint, compromising information related to their cybersecurity and cloud infrastructure and other business departments. And then those are really the result driven by poor password hygiene. Folks not doing what it is that we've been asking them to do for many decades now in terms of how to set strong passwords and not recycle them, and also good understanding of how to use multi-factor authentication. And those, I think, are, while very impactful attacks, that we've seen this far this year, they're using very much old school techniques to still be successful, which makes Dean's point around what we have been doing just simply isn't working. But we also saw a very innovative attack so far this year, and that was the Arup group over in Britain, where deep fake AI was used to impersonate their CFO, both audio and video, to convince employees to transfer funds out of the business. But even though it was using this very modern technology to perpetrate that, there were a number of red flags. Things like this this fake CFO telling the employees, "Hey, this is a confidential transaction. You can't let anybody else know in the company know about this." There's a number of red flags that could have stopped that, but ultimately they didn't. So while the attacks may be getting more sophisticated and we're putting better technology to try to defend against them, ultimately many of our people are still failing to do the basics right. Things like good password hygiene, not clicking on unverified links, and that has led to the point where we honestly probably cannot blame technology leaders too much for trying to solve this cybersecurity issue by technology or with technology, because people are the ones who still, are, like Dean said, are the 95% likelihood of how folks are going to get inside of our system. So the way we have traditionally focused on cybersecurity is that we've installed equipment and technology to catch the risks, but we know that some of that doesn't get caught, and we've also designed the most set of robust processes and procedures that we can to try to catch the things that make it through the technology barriers that we put in place. But ultimately, we still have risk coming through, and these risks are often not only unmitigated, they're oftentimes unrecognized. And so what many business leaders are asking themselves are these very uncomfortable questions around, are we going to be next? If so, how bad will it be? Will it ultimately lead to the failure of our business? And we've seen that many large organizations have failed because of the effects of these cyber threats. So we believe that there is fundamentally a problem with this technology first driven approach to cybersecurity, because it's creating what we call a vicious cycle that paradoxically is adding risk and undermining the very technology defenses that are being installed to counteract this issue. So let me talk just for a couple of moments about how this cycle is working. So we're adding technology, and this technology oftentimes is required to just simply operate our business. It may be new systems or programs or applications. It could be the move to the cloud infrastructure or a new security technology like ZTNA. But as we add that new technology, we're also adding people and processes to administer and manage and execute that new technology. And as we do that, it causes the overall operational complexity in the business to increase. We mentioned earlier, the more complex the environment is, the more likely it is that people are going to make mistakes. And the more complex the environment it is, it's also more challenging from a management perspective to understand, have visibility, and control all those processes that we need to execute and manage the business on a day-to-day basis. So what that leads to is poor performance. Maybe it's poor business performance, maybe it's poor security performance, but whatever it is that it leads to greater risk or greater likelihood of those risks that we're trying to defend against being able to make it through our defenses. And then that's going to lead us to want to add even more technology, which is going to put us into this perpetual cycle of fighting against this. And that's why we call it the vicious technology cycle. Ultimately, this technology first approach is failing because our business environment, the operating environment, the technology environment is so complicated. It's so complex today that nobody can fully understand it. We've long since passed the point in many of our businesses where we can point to a single cause and a single effect. There's a complex web of interactions that go on inside of all of our businesses that we can no longer say with certainty, if I do this, I can expect this sort of outcome to happen. Further, because as the environment becomes even more complex, people are continuing to make mistakes, and they're further undermining all of the technology we're putting in place to try to control those inputs and processes and outcomes. And lastly, the resource demands on the organizations are just becoming unbearable. No IT leader that we have talked to in recent years has said to us, I have a sufficient organization. My staff is big enough to do all the work that we have to do. They simply can't keep up with the demand that's being placed on them. In fact, recent research has shown that about 30 days after an IT vulnerability, a critical IT vulnerability is announced and published, about 85% of them remain unremediated in organizations 30 days after announced. If we look further down range, at the 6-month point, we still have about 20% of organizations that have still not addressed those critical vulnerabilities. And after a year, it only drops. There's still about 8% of organizations that are shown to have not addressed that. And that, in our view, has an awful lot to do with the demands, other demands on resources, the technology resources that are required to keep up with these systems. So we believe that the approach to cybersecurity must change to become much more effective. And this different approach needs to get to what Dean mentioned at the beginning. It needs to enable resilience, and it must enable the organization and its people to become very adaptable in this environment as it continues to change around us. So we believe, and we've seen in many of our client organizations, that the solution lies in focusing on human performance. To address those unmitigated and oftentimes unrecognized risks. And there are certain organizations out there called high reliability organizations that have successfully tackled this, what we call the 95% problem. They have figured out how to move their people from being the most likely cause of failure to the most likely reason that they are not going to fail. Or when they do find something not going the way it should be, the people in the organization are the most likely reason that they're going to catch it in time to do something about it before it becomes catastrophic. So let's step back and just ask ourselves, what is a high reliability organization? So an HRO is an organization that has a remarkably low number of incidents, despite the fact that they're performing highly complex and oftentimes very hazardous tasks, or tasks that come with an extremely high consequence of failure. There's been a significant amount of academic research that's been done about on HROs and how they operate. And what that research has shown is that HROs are very unique because of the way they organize and operate, such that they're allowing the people in the organization to improve the quality of the attention that they are giving to the work that they're doing and the entire environment in which they're operating. And this quality of attention makes people more alert and more aware to subtle changes in how things are going, such that they're able to detect that something's not right, investigate and react to it before it becomes a significant issue. And that's not to say that HROs don't have things go wrong in their business or their organizations, because they do. But what sets HROs apart is the fact that they're able to detect when things start going wrong and correct it before it becomes a big problem. So part of what we know about HROs is that they have these 5 characteristics that end up being critical to or essential to how it is that they're able to achieve the results that they do. They have this notion of being preoccupied by failure. That's actually different than how most leaders, how most organizations think about their business. We assume that things are going to go how we plan, but HROs actually are assuming that they're not. And so they're putting conditions in place to be able to detect it when things stop going the way they should be. They're very reluctant to simplify or generalize. And when we think about simplifying in our business, that means that oftentimes what we're moving towards is one size fits all approaches. Hey, we do it this way over here, so therefore we need to do it that way over there. HROs are very resistant to that sort of thinking, or thinking that a single process or a single way of approaching a problem set will apply across the entirety of their business. So they're very reluctant to simplify. And while they're reluctant to simplify, they're very attuned to the operational reality of their business. They understand what is going on, who's doing what, how they're doing it, and what the expected outcomes or expected results that they're likely to see. And if they don't see those results, they start looking under the under the covers to see why are we not getting the results that we expected. HROs have a very strong commitment to resilience, and I think this is, again, it's different than how many organizations think about their business. Because they are preoccupied with failure, because they are expecting things to not go the way they intend, they build resilience into the organization, which means that they equip their people to be able to respond when something is not right. So many times when we see in an operation something is not going the way it should be, the people that are working there oftentimes will freeze because they're not really sure how to respond. It's a very low resilience sort of situation. HROs train and equip their people how to recognize and then how to think their way through those issues. They know what they should do. They know who they should escalate to. And even just as important as that, the organization is tuned to listening to folks bring issues to them to say, hey, this doesn't look right. I don't think this is going as it should, and then taking actions. So many of the catastrophic events that we have seen happening around the world, if we go back to looking at some of the cyber incidences, many of the catastrophic industrial events or aviation or space exploration catastrophic events that happen, so often there was somebody in the organization, oftentimes pretty low level, who knew exactly that something was not right, and they knew exactly what was going to happen if things continued down the path, but they weren't equipped to be able to raise the issue, or maybe they did raise it and the organization wasn't listening to them. And so that puts us on to the last point, why it's so important to defer to expertise. Again, that's different than how many organizations think about it, where we tend to defer to either experience or positional authority. Oftentimes, the folks who are closest to the work, who are executing what we're asking, the tasks that have to go on in the business, they are the ones who are most likely to recognize when things are not as they should be. So by using these, by applying these 5 characteristics, the HROs are able to create a deep level of resilience to guard against just the typical mistakes, errors, omissions, and breakdowns that happen day in and day out in all of our businesses, but if they're not caught, can lead to very catastrophic outcomes. So let's talk real quickly about how HROs came to be. They have really evolved from technology that was developed during World War II, the nuclear program that led to the Navy designing and installing mobile nuclear reactors to power ships and submarines. And Navy leadership recognized that the traditional way of command and control, giving orders and having people follow them, would not work in an environment where the technology demanded a high degree of resilience and an understanding of what the system it was operating in was actually doing. And because the nuclear Navy pioneered this notion of high reliability organizations, they have been able to operate over 150 mobile nuclear reactors for over 60 years without a single catastrophic incident. And we saw out of that, other organizations started to adapt that. U.S. Aviation is one in particular, where again, a lot of rapidly changing and developing technology led to a lot of catastrophic outcomes. And so they started adopting these similar principles of HRO in naval aviation, which ultimately was quickly adopted into commercial aviation and across the FAA and the North American aerospace complex. And what we've seen is that out of that, there's been a 33x reduction in commercial aviation fatalities since 1993, all based upon these principles of HRO. Since then, it started to move into other industries like energy and chemicals, and more recently into healthcare. Healthcare, it's had a remarkable impact where we've seen 100% decreases of incidents at major healthcare systems over a relatively short period of time because they've applied the principles related to HROs. In fact, there's been a new way of thinking about this or branding this that has turned into high reliability healthcare. And that has become now the gold standard for thinking about how healthcare is delivered across the U.S. We're here at Wilson Paramount. What we believe is the next iteration is that we're going to see this notion of high reliability moving into technology and cybersecurity, and we think we're going to start to see emerging here over the course of the next few months to years this notion of high reliability cyber organizations, where they are actually moving to use human capabilities as the most effective layer of defense to prevent catastrophic cybersecurity incidents. So how do HROs do it? Well, they recognize that they can't rely just upon the equipment and processes to effectively mitigate the risks. The typical approach is to, design equipment, maintain it well, think about our processes and procedures, train our employees on them to execute them. And that leaves us to the position where we are able to mitigate and manage the risks that we know about. But what about the other things? Well, this is where HROs take the different approach. They assume that their equipment and technology is going to fail. They assume that their processes and procedures are going to be inadequate as things start evolving in a way that they didn't anticipate. So what they focus on is implementing the right sort of practices so that the people working in their business can react to those breakdowns and deal with the equipment failures or deal with the process failures or even deal with one of their colleagues, a fellow employee, not doing what it is they're supposed to do. And it's at that point that HROs have the ability to also react to the known risks, but they have developed or evolved to be able to handle the unknown risks that we don't realize are surrounding our organization or operations as we're going about our day-to-day business. And so because of this resilience, you have very dynamic operating systems that are focused on learning and sharing and acting on those weak signals that are the actual early indications before some catastrophic event becomes to be. So let's look specifically at what HROs do. And what we know is that all high-performing organizations share a very similar set of traits that define their operational values and guide the behaviors in the organization. Here at Wilson Paramount, we call them the HRO pillars. And you can see there on the screen. They're things like the level of knowledge, formality, active team backup, a questioning attitude, integrity. These pillars are, we call them pillars, but these are characteristics that we see in every high-performing organization. Now, some organizations may call them different things. They may talk about having, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or different set of operational values that they key on. But at their essence, they get down and they are the exact same thing that we see in these 5 pillars here. And what makes them so powerful is that these pillars work as a system. So you can think of any one of these characteristics, and it's going to have both positive and negative expressions. And when these pillars are working together as a system, what we see is that the negative expressions are subdued and the positive expressions are accentuated. So an example in an IT environment might be, I'm asked to go set a configuration on a system, and it needs to be done right away because there's something, some change has been made and I need to reconfigure the system. And I have the knowledge to do that. But in an HRO environment, I understand how important this configuration change is based upon not only my knowledge of how to do that change, but the effects of that change on the system. And I also know that we operate with formality, meaning we have procedures and we have processes for doing those things. And so even though my colleague or my boss is asking me to do this right now, I'm going to actively back that person up and say, we need to get the procedure out. We need to make sure that we've validated everything is correct before we implement these changes across the system. And that's an example where, because I'm leaning on both my integrity, because I know I'm going to always follow procedures, the formality, because we have procedures in place, the fact that I have a questioning attitude, I'm thinking about what could go wrong if I don't do it in accordance with the procedures and the processes we have in place. Now we start to make sure that we're able to key on those potential bad outcomes and prevent them from happening before they even get started. And so this is what HROs have done. They've realized that human performance is the strongest, most powerful lever that they have to improve performance in these dynamic, quickly evolving situations where oftentimes those weak signals can lead to high consequences and failure. How many times have we seen, a major technology system shut down that affects, our lives on a daily basis? I'm thinking about the AT&T event earlier this year where they shut down the cellular network because of a patch that was pushed that was not ready to be activated because they didn't follow the processes that should have gone along with it. So HROs also realize that just defining those pillars and saying that we value integrity and informality and a questioning attitude isn't enough. They have to help their employees understand what those things mean. So in an HRO, they'll take those key operational values and they will define them in a very specific way that makes sense to every role and every level in the organization. And then they'll take those operational values and then they'll translate them into the work that people are doing. So we may tell people, hey, we operate with formality. We are very serious about understanding our job. We understand that we have processes and procedures, and we respect them. Well, that means that in our practices is that we actually use those processes. We have ways to go and verify that those process steps were all actually completed. When something goes wrong, we do a review, and we actually take action on what we learn in those reviews. And so you could say similarly around level of knowledge. That's an important one where oftentimes people think I need to know how to do my job. But in an HRO, we want people to know not only how they do their job, but also why they do it the way they do and how it affects all of the other things that are going on around them that their job impacts. And you make similar levels of definitions and helping people understand this. And HROs put the effort in to make sure that for every level, every role in the organization, they understand what those pillars mean and how it affects the work that they do on a day in and a day out basis. When we think about what those pillars enable, it really comes down to this notion of operational discipline. And so, so many of the failures that we see in technology and cybersecurity ultimately come back to a lack of somebody didn't do what they were supposed to do. That gets us to the 95% problem. But in an HRO, you have an environment that's called, that's very operationally disciplined. And operational discipline means that people do the right thing the right way every time. And that's hard. It's easy to say, but it's actually very hard to do. And it gets harder the more complex your operating environment is. Because to have operational discipline requires that people know what the right thing is. They have to know how to do it, and they have to know when to do it. So what the pillars and those the system of pillars working together and the definitions allow is it allows people to understand what the right thing is, how to do it, and when they should do it. And so that's where we believe that applying these HRO principles and moving toward an operationally disciplined environment is what is actually essential to improve the effectiveness of our cybersecurity. So today, most organizations, they think about managing cybersecurity, as we talked about, with technology and processes, and then that's all kind of overlaid with traditional cybersecurity frameworks. These are things like the NIST CSF 2.0, and these frameworks are very necessary, but they are insufficient on their own because they don't bring in this element of how people are working or the specific operational context that exists in your business today. So it's a generic framework. It tells you some good things that need to exist, but it's entirely insufficient. When we layer in the high reliability principles and integrate those principles into your specific management system, then it starts to become very powerful. But one of the things that we have to realize that is we have to guard against is this isn't just an IT management problem. We need to integrate these IT related management topics into our overall business system and business management processes for this to really be effective. So how do you get there? Well, we've seen a number of clients that we've led on HRO journeys to become very effective in their industry, doing very hard things, very reliably, becoming industry leaders because of this. And what we know is that it's a journey that every organization has to go through. And so there are 4 steps that we see along this journey. The first is to define those HRO characteristics and what they mean for the people in your organization. And then you have to measure those characteristics and how strong they are. Are you actually following them? Where are the gaps, and what do you need to do to close those gaps? And then you have to start managing to them. And that's where you start integrating these into your management processes. Managers and leaders at all levels have a fundamental understanding of not only their business area, but how the IT systems and the security related aspects that they are working with all work together for them to be able to do the to execute the work that they are charged with every day. And then lastly, we integrate all of those characteristics into the business management processes, not just the IT management processes, but the totality of the business processes. And that probably sounds like a lot of work, and it can be if you start in the wrong spot. But if you start down at the left-hand side of the slide, what we see is that you start getting very strong benefits very quickly from this. So just simply defining expectations and setting them along the HRO mindset is very, very powerful. Starting to measure and close gaps that you can see has an enormous impact. And doing these level 1, level 2 activities actually generates a tremendous amount of momentum that reduces the management burden to get to level 3 and level 4. We've seen a number of organizations try to jump into a level 3 or level 4 approach, and they've all failed because they have to do the work to get the right definitions and the right effects going in the organization down to the lowest level, from the most senior leaders down to the most lowest levels. And we have a number of tools that can help you along this journey and accelerate and de-risk your transformation to a high reliability cyber organization. One of them is our yardstick assessment, which allows us to measure and quantify your IT culture against known behaviors and values that exist in high reliability organizations. That's a very powerful assessment to understand where you are and what the barriers to change are to actually becoming a high reliability cyber organization. We can assess the effectiveness of your cyber management system and how well it is integrated into your overall business management processes. And oftentimes that is an enormous gap that requires a change in mindset by amongst business leaders to understand that they have a responsibility for IT that they didn't previously think that they had. And there are very powerful tools like these run books, which are very effective operations manuals that are not just the step-by-step list of things that need to be done to accomplish an IT-related task, but it takes a system-level view to understand what the risks are, what the consequences are, and it overlays the specific HRO principles that have to be applied for the IT systems and the security systems to be managed and administered in an effective way. And these are very much like the checklists that are used in aviation or in an operating room that have significantly turned around those type of operations and made them very, very reliable and safe and consistently executable. And then lastly, we have a path to lead organizations through a high reliability transformation. It's a proven approach that we take organizations to take them along that journey that I laid out previously, to be able to understand where they are today, define what those characteristics are in their organization and how they relate to to every role and every level, and then actually get them to start working. That HRO transformation can happen very quickly. We've shown that business performance improves dramatically when these HRO principles are integrated into an organization. And we'd love to talk with you more about any of these tools or any of the topics, and would feel free to please just reach out to us after the webinar to learn more about these. So that's how we believe the significant change in what is the significant change that's required to make cybersecurity much more effective and get after this 95% problem. So before I open it up to questions, I want to just encourage you to go to the WP&C website. You can follow the QR code there. We have a short cyber assessment, 12 questions that you can answer to get an understanding of how HRO like your current cyber and IT operations are, as well as some set of recommendations to address the most glaring of the issues that may exist in your organization. And then I would also encourage you to sign up for the report that we mentioned earlier on ZTNA and how complexity is undermining the effectiveness of zero trust network access, and how you can address that and get in front of these issues so it doesn't turn into being a problem or a failure point like much of the digital transformations have been for many organizations. And lastly, we also have on our website, or at the link that'll be on these slides, you can watch Dean's webinar where he talked in depth about those issues with ZTNA and complexity and how to tackle those problems. So with that, let me hand it back over to Nick. I think we have a few questions that have come in. So Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Ernie. The first question is, I think my organization is in the vicious complexity cycle. How can we break the cycle?
Yeah, that's tough. And it's tough for business leaders to think about, well, we have all this complexity. How would we tackle a piece of it? I want to stop doing something. But the challenge is that everything that an organization does, it has done for a reason. And somebody has made a decision that, we're going to have a new process or a new set of controls or a new system or a set of products for some particular reason. And so while complexity gets added in kind of bit by bit, in order to be able to really address the effects of that complexity, you have to step back and you have to take out chunks of complexity. Because quite frankly, if I'm a mid-level manager and I have to do 20 or 30 reports a week, simply taking one or two of those reports off of my plate isn't going to move the needle very much, right? And quite frankly, probably somebody really cares about that report. And so it's very hard incrementally to remove complexity. So what we do is we take a very much a whole of system, whole of organization view, and we say, okay, what is it that the organization is really needing to accomplish, and what are the things that are enabling that? And then we can go and we can oftentimes tackle complexity in using that whole of system view. But what you can't do, or oftentimes you can't do, is you can't do it within a single business function, because the complexity stretches across our operations, our finance, our planning, our strategy, our logistics, supply chain. It is very much interconnected and woven into how we do business. So we think about how to get after that. We have to have a complexity agenda that says, what are the sort of problems that we're going to tackle in the business, and how are we going to do this cross-functionally? And so when we try to tackle that stuff in a functional vertical, it is very, very difficult to make a meaningful progress on that.
And let me just add one thing, to the person who asked this question. I just think just the fact that you're asking this question means you've taken the first step. In other words, you can't fix a problem that you don't recognize that you have, right? And so the fact that you're in the vicious complexity cycle and you recognize that simply adding in yet another piece of technology or complex process is not going to necessarily make things better allows you to then start to kind of say, well, how do I how do I get after the real underlying issue, as Ernie talked about?
And the next question is, my company is NIST compliant. What value is there in moving to HRO?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'll let Dean expand on this. Even if we are compliant with these overall cybersecurity frameworks, there's a difference between being able to say that we're compliant and that we're getting the effectiveness and the results that we need out of the requirements that exist in those frameworks. We know for sure that those frameworks that exist today are entirely focused on process and types of technology to address the barriers, and that gets us, into that kind of the resistance based approach that Dean talked about. But it says nothing to how we handle resiliency. So, Dean, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Ernie. I mean, there are a lot of NIST standards, right? There's the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is a set of guidelines and best practices at a very high level of abstraction. You've got various NIST control standards, control families like NIST 853, NIST 800-171. All of these are good. But none of them tell you actually how to reduce that to practice in my environment, in my operational environment, with my set of constraints, with my people, and with the challenges that I have with operational excellence in achieving a high level of human performance in my environment. NIST does nothing to do that. And quite frankly, I was disappointed when NIST made the transition from NIST CSF made a transition from CSF 1.1 to CSF 2.0. Because in CSF 2.0, they added another dimension, which was governance, which was missing from NIST 1.1, and which is quite important, but they completely failed to address this issue of human performance and operational discipline. So, nothing bad about the NIST families of standards. They're all extremely important and play a role, but they are insufficient to achieve high level of resilience and reliability in your execution.
And building off that, another question is, my IT department has historically been resistant to standardized ways of working. How do I overcome that resistance from my IT developers to implement standard runbooks and management systems?
Yeah, this is very common, right? We oftentimes, in many organizations, we champion the knowledge that an individual has, and we say, I can ask this person and they can answer that question off the top of their head, or they can just go to the machine and execute this task because they've done it 1,000 times. But in the end, people are fallible. And if there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that I make a mistake, and there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that Dean will make a mistake, but if Dean comes behind and checks my work to verify that I did it correctly, suddenly we've gone from a 1 in 1,000 chance of making an error there to 1 in a million. And so, and then we'll further reduce that significantly if we have a defined set of processes that we are both executing to when I execute it and when I perform the work, and then Dean comes back behind me to verify it. And that doesn't mean that we have to do a process check on every single piece of work that we do. It's unreasonable to think that, but there are certain things that we should absolutely be coming behind and checking that the configuration was set correctly, or we had done these certain set of activities before we enabled it. And that's where the run books, the concept of the run books, are so important, because they identify what are the most likely and the highest risk points of failure, and where the consequences or when people are doing the work, how they're most likely to make mistakes. And quite frankly, if people are resistant to that, it's a leadership issue that folks need to work their teams through, because we know people are going to make mistakes. And if we fail to just simply acknowledge that and then try to do something about it, then we're just perpetuating this cycle. Dean, any other thoughts?
Yeah, and I agree. And this is one of the biggest transitions and challenges, I think, to get to the sort of HRO level of performance, because we are in an environment where, we depend on the knowledge of the smart guy or the smart gal who, is great. And he or she does it 99% of the time properly. But what happens when in that 1% of the time, or what happens when that smart guy or smart girl leaves the organization and somebody with less competence comes in? And in high reliability organizations, what we do is through formalization of processes and building sort of the culture of formality and working with those processes, we institutionalize a way of working so that the way of working is not dependent on a single individual, right? But it's baked into how the organization functions, and a new person can come in very quickly, be brought into that environment, be brought up to that standard, understand what good looks like in our organization. We have the guardrails and the safety checks to protect while that person is learning. And and all of that is not just about the run books. The run books are important, but it's also about how those run books get inculcated into the management practices of the organization. So you need both to make things work well. But I agree with you. It's a tremendous challenge.
It's a leadership issue, and other organizations, healthcare has been one where they've applied this concept so successfully. And they've taken away the need for an individual to speak up, because they've got a process that comes back and verifies that we've done what we said we're going to do, and they catch so many human errors because of that.
And are these high reliability pillars and operations common from one company to another, or are they company specific?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. They're both. They are common, as I mentioned. Every high performing organization shares a similar set of characteristics and traits in how they operate. They may call them different things, they may describe them in different ways, but when you boil them down to the essence of what they mean, they all mean the same thing. So that's where they're common. But where they're very different is that you have to take those set of principles, and then you have to then apply them to your business. And you have to think your way through that, what those things like formality and questioning attitude and active team backup, what those things mean to not only just the business at a high level, but to the people who are executing the various work that goes on in your business. What does this mean for somebody who's setting up and provisioning new accounts? What does that mean for somebody who is, performing a customer service role? They probably mean very different things, and we need to help the people in the organization internalize that and understand what that means. And so that's what HROs have done, and that's why that level one process is level one, step one of maturity is so important, because you have to define what those principles mean. And then you have to communicate that to the organization and set expectations that this is now the way that we're going to be doing our work.
Yeah, and just to add quickly to that, I would say it's not just about the differences, by company, but there are differences by industry and by business function, right? And every time high reliability way of working has moved, as Ernie pointed out, moving from the early days of the nuclear navy, moving into nuclear naval aviation, moving into chemical manufacturing and so on, eventually into healthcare. At every one of those steps, the high reliability way of working has to be adapted to the specifics of that industry. And that's the same thing that needs to happen, and our firm is doing, is taking it now from high reliability healthcare, which is the latest place it went, and saying, what does it mean and how do we adapt it to the digital domain, to the IT domain, so that you get a new way of conceptualizing high reliability that is well adapted to that domain.
And our final question is, I work for a large, highly distributed organization with multiple business units. How should I think about embarking on this journey?
Well, so we've helped a number of organizations, and there's different ways to get started. We've helped organizations, get focused around a singular business line. Maybe it's this particular business unit or business line, or maybe it's around a functional area, or maybe it's around tackling a particular issue. And so, an issue may be like, hey, we're really struggling to manage accounts and provision and keep configuration for all of our IT users correct, right? That would be a very powerful issue around which to start defining what are the HRO ways of working for that particular business function and set of tasks. So we can take all of those, we can take any of those kind of dimensions to get started, but the key to when you do get started is, one, you have to clearly define the areas in which you're going to work and who's going to be participating, because leadership is absolutely required for this. And then you also have to have a very keen understanding around how things are done today, so that you can have a very clearly articulate to the organization and the people about what is going to change. And that is so important. And so that's where our yardstick assessment is so powerful and helpful in this regard, because it will clearly define how work is being done today, what people think is important and what their operational values are. And it'll also identify where the hard points around making change are going to be. And so my recommendation would be to start with the yardstick assessment, and then let's define some of the issues that you're struggling with, that you know that need to be improved upon, and then we'll apply those HRO concepts in those areas, and then that can generate a lot of momentum to take into other areas.
Yeah, and Ernie, I just to add to that, I would say the beauty of the yardstick assessment is it allows me to kind of see myself in relation to, you know, what really good looks like for an HRO, the other the highest quality benchmarks out there. And I think what happens is, for organizations who think they're performing at a high level, when we do that assessment and then they really see how they're performing, it's an eye-opener for them. And that eye-opener moment is very important to get to. It gets them psychologically oriented towards, okay, we can do better. And then you can take it from there.
And that concludes our Q&A session. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and questions. I will turn it over to Ernie Spence for closing remarks.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. It's a very important discussion, we think, and we think that the companies that are going to be at the forefront of becoming a high reliability cyber organizations are going to be the ones who are leading this next phase of understanding how to operate in this increasingly challenging environment, but it's technology driven. So we look forward to talking to you again soon about this. The slides and a recording of the webinar will be made available here very soon. We'll have that in your inboxes. And if you have questions, you want to talk more about what it is that we've talked about today, please reach out and we'd be happy to have a conversation. Thanks for joining. Have a great weekend.